What's up, Savvy Expats? Today I have a special guest with me because he's also a fellow Chicagoan who's been living in the Philippines for the past, how long now, Greg?
Well, on and off for maybe 12 years now.
12 years.
2012 was my first trip out here, and I stayed for a year that first time.
So if anything, you're more of a seasoned expat in the Philippines than I am.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to have you on, Greg.
All right, cool, nice.
We met like a couple days ago and figured I had to have you on the podcast.
Absolutely, cool.
So for starters, Greg, where are you from?
I was raised in Chicago. I'm actually Polish born, so I was born in Poland. I'm a European citizen as well as a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
But I spent my entire formative life from age 7 to like my college in the U.S. So
Right.
I consider myself American.
Right, yeah, so you're pretty much raised out there in
Yeah.
the States. And so what brings you to the Philippines?
So I came to the Philippines when I started my outsourcing business. That was the main thing. And actually, I used to be married before, so my ex-wife's family told me because they were from the U.S. as well, but Filipino ancestry. So they said, well, Philippines is the place to do business, and that's kind of what brought me out here. And then I fell in love with the place and just really enjoyed being out here.
Right. So you said you came here to do business, but like back in the States, were you doing anything for work there?
So back in the U.S. during college, I used to work in like computer repair and things like that. And then I went for my master's degree in Australia. So I spent a year in Sydney and got my Master of Commerce. When I came back, I was working at a call center in the U.S. doing tech support because this was the economic crisis of 2008-9, around that time frame. And but I had already been dabbling with outsourcing for websites, things like that. I had like little freelance kind of work. So that's when I decided, I was 24 years old at the time, that okay, I'll start my own like call center or like outsourcing operation, like time to make that a big thing.
So would you say that moving to the Philippines is a strategic move for your business, being that it's a call center work?
Yeah, definitely, because a lot of people actually do business with the Philippines and never been here.
Right.
And I've actually even met one person who has an outsourcing agency for the Philippines, but she's never been in the Philippines. And it's like, well, there's limits to how good you can take it if you don't know the culture or the people.
Right.
So in my case, I have the advantage that since my ex-wife's family is from the Filipino culture, I spent many, many years in that culture while in the U.S. And then I came here, got to know a lot of local people. So I kind of like learned that culture pretty deep. Like I've spent so many years now immersed in Filipino culture that I really get it on a deep level, I think, at least as far as a foreigner can learn it.
Right, yeah, and you kind of get into the mindset of like Filipinos, how to manage them as employees and whatnot.
Exactly, and I've observed a lot over the years. So I've been doing my business now for 14 years. So it's been, it's been a long journey, but a lot of lessons along the way.
I'm sure. And so can you walk us through, Greg, like your entire Philippine journey from when you left the U.S. to where you landed and leading up to now? And really quick, before Greg gets to that, if you're planning on moving to BGC and you don't know where to start and what are the initial steps that you need to take as an expat for a successful move out here, click the link down below and claim your free 15-step checklist. By the end of reading this free PDF, you'll have it all figured out of what you need to do not only before coming to the Philippines, but also upon arrival. So claim the free checklist down below, link in the description, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sure. So I first came to Manila. That was the first place, and I still remember when I was at the airport, and it was my first time to be in like a third world country, right? So it's like a developing country, whatever terminology
At that time,
you use.
I'm sure it still was though.
Oh yeah, I mean in 2012, it was still. I mean it still is now when you get off the airport in Pasay and you see all the like when you're driving through. And at the time we were staying with somebody in Novaliches, which was in Quezon City. So that whole drive through all of the like areas was like really like eye-opening already. It was like, whoa, where am I? What is this place? I have never been in a place like that before.
And have you ever been outside of the U.S. at that point?
Oh yeah, I was born in Poland, so I do remember a little bit of that. But Poland's like Eastern European is kind of like a little bit more developed, at least in the areas I lived in. I've also been to Canada, Australia, so mostly just all developed countries at that point.
So was it like a shocker for you?
It was definitely a bit of a shock, for sure. But then I stayed in Manila for a few months, and then I went out to South Cotabato, which is a small province in Mindanao.
Straight into the
it was straight into it, and I was like the only white person in the whole city.
They must have thought you were like a missionary or something.
Well, actually, people got to know who I am over time, and it became a little bit scary because I would go to the grocery store, and then the cashier was like, scanning my groceries, and she's like, your name is Greg, right? You're the guy who's got that office there and you're staying on that street in that hotel. And I'm like, how does this person know me? I don't know. This is a cashier at a grocery store, right?
Yeah.
And then I went for like a massage, and then the massage lady was like, oh, you're that guy with that call center business here, right? Like, oh, yeah, on this street, right?
Social security number.
I'm just like, how does everybody know me? I've never met these people, right? But it's like being one of the only foreigners there at the time was like, especially younger foreigners, because I was like, I think I was 26 or 27 at the time I was in South Cotabato. Okay. So being one of the younger guys there, I really stood out. Like everybody's heads turning everywhere I went.
I'm sure. You're kind of like a celebrity in that area.
Yeah, so one of my employees said, like, sir, you're like Justin Bieber here.
That's so funny. I've had 2 people already on the podcast where Filipinos would equate them, despite like how they look whatever may be. As long as they're white, they're Justin Bieber.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you're not saying I'm not as handsome as Justin Bieber.
But you know. So,
but no, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's like because I was one of the first younger guys. Because some of the older expats were there, like 60s, 70s, like retirees, but they've never seen like a 20s. White guy before. So.
I mean, it's Mindanao, South Cotabato. I'm not sure how many foreigners they get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's on the watch list for the State Department.
So,
like
what
the island of
made you
Mindanao,
specifically go to like Mindanao?
Well, that's where my ex-wife's family was from, so they had some property there, and then that's why I went over there to help them out with some of their family stuff. So I wouldn't have really even known that place exists without that, because I wasn't really well plugged into what's going on in the Philippines at the time.
So did you stay put in Mindanao for how long?
About a year.
About a year, and then where did you move off to?
So I went back and forth. So then I went to the U.S. for a little bit. Then I came back, and I had an office in Davao City.
Okay.
So I stayed in Davao quite often, but I would go back and forth. Stay in the U.S. a year, go here for like a year or several months at a time, go back and forth. Starting about 2017, I started staying here most of the time.
Here in BGC?
Well, no, I was in Davao actually, because I still had my office in Davao at the time. So that was kind of, and I really like Davao City a lot. And at the time, there was still some expats there. So now after COVID, a lot of the expats cleared out. There's less people to hang out with, so it's not as appealing. But before COVID, I had a pretty good group of friends that I could hang out with, and it's a very nice, peaceful city. So I still like it. It still has I'd still like to go back there one day when it kind of recovers from everything.
Right.
But I stayed mostly in Davao, and then I went up to BGC, and I did stay in BGC for like short trips, like a month or 2 at a time. But then I really moved to BGC during COVID, because when all the lockdowns were happening and all that, I decided that like, well, I guess I need to go where the rest of the foreigners are, and I didn't want to go back to the U.S. So I moved to BGC, where you had a little bit more freedom compared to like the lockdowns in the province, and stayed here for about 13 months, so just over a year before I went back to the U.S. briefly.
I see.
And then I stayed in Thailand for a bit because they weren't letting foreigners back in here. So once I left, I couldn't come back. So I went to the U.S. And then after the U.S., I went to Thailand, stayed there for about a year, then moved back here last year.
Right, and then now permanent home base.
Yeah, now I would say this will be the place. I have a lease here, long-term lease. So I decided to renew that actually recently for another year. Nice. So I'm just going to stay in BGC as my home base in Asia. I'll still travel around a bit, but it's easier to travel here and then go to Thailand or wherever, a few hours, then go all the way back to the U.S. and all that. Like, I don't have plans to move back to the U.S. as a full-time living anymore.
Why is that?
Well, I think the cost of living in the U.S. is out of control. Since I've been living also here for many years, most of my social life has now changed over to be here. Like, most of my friends are here. I keep in touch with like one friend from high school in the U.S. and like maybe 1 or 2 other friends from like elementary school or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't really know anybody to hang out with anymore. Like, most of my contacts over the years have kind of like gone their own way. And I'm sure if I went there, I could like say, oh, hey, I'm back in town. I haven't seen you in 7 years. Let's hang out. But it's like rebuilding a social life from scratch. Whereas I know tons of people here in the Philippines as well as in Thailand. And I'm part of some groups that are like digital nomads. So they're always popping in and out. So it's never like lonely in the Philippines. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, before we started rolling, I was even mentioning how every day I get invited by somebody to go out somewhere. So it's like, the social life can really be as active as you want it to be.
Yeah. And so it seems like your entire life is pretty much rooted in the Philippines now, from your relationships, your work, and what you got used to.
Yeah.
What would you say, like, or how long did it take for you to get to the point where you're like, okay, now I'm settled in the Philippines, and it doesn't feel like the States is so much more my home anymore?
I think it's like a thing that gradually happened, actually. Like, it's like it happens gradually and then all at once, right? It's like you have this kind of epiphany moment where, for a long time, I used to just rent, for example, short-term leases, because I was here, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, something like that between trips. And I always felt like every few months I should go back home. But since I no longer have a home in the U.S., like I sold the property I had there and all that, so now it's kind of like, well, now I need an actual home. So like, I guess this is home now, right? This is the default. But before I made that decision, it was kind of like, well, de facto it already was. But I was actually just kind of denying it to myself in a way, thinking like, no, home is the US and I'm just visiting. But it was kind of like, well, yeah, but all my social life is here, all my friends are here, my relationships here, everything's here now. And it's been for a while. Like, there's nothing, like, what is home really?
Yeah.
And for me being Polish, so I was born in Poland. I left when I was 7 years old. Went back only one time when I was like 14 years old for a 2-week vacation. So I don't really so in the US, I'm also kind of an outsider, if you think about it, as an immigrant.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is home? What is the concept of home really?
For you now, it's just wherever you are.
Just wherever I am, I guess. Especially since I haven't been back to Europe. And, the last time was 25 years ago that I was in my home country, right?
Right.
I still speak the language, but is that home? If I go there, it's like a strange place now. So
You're
where
still
do I
kind of an
really belong?
outsider. If anything, you're more used to the Philippines than you are Poland.
Exactly, yeah. So if I go to Poland now, people would say, oh, you're an outsider, you're an American, by your accent, by your culture.
Yeah.
If I go to the US, you can make the case saying, oh, well, you're an immigrant here, you're not really from here, right? So it's kind of like, I'm really from nowhere now.
Yeah. Was there any like, I'm curious, was there any crisis, any identity crisis from that?
I think maybe it's a little ongoing, I guess, in a way.
That's why you're still here in the Philippines.
It's like, I'm just like, this is something I've been thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about your business and how you're able to make money abroad? Because you did mention that you are working here, right?
Well, I mean, I own a business that's a virtual assistant service. So people will come to me when they want to hire people in the Philippines. So like my clients, for example, Canadian, my best client right now is a Canadian client. They have a pretty big team with me. And so they'll come to me and say, look, we need to hire some people to do virtual assistant work, writing articles, SEO, whatever the work is, video editing, you name it. And I'll find those people here for them in the Philippines and hire them. So that's kind of what the business is based. That's what it's been doing. I've been doing for pretty much the last 14 years.
Last 14 years
yeah.
here.
So my team runs itself. I don't actually personally do much. I mean, I'll ask my team, how's it going? Is there any problems?
Right.
But when I have a new client, I'll have to give them my expertise to let them hire the best people, but then after that, the team runs itself. So I'm not really working like a full shift or anything.
Something that I like that you mentioned in the past is that you don't live to work. You
work to live.
You work to
right?
live, right? So,
exactly.
So you're living like what it seems like a really good lifestyle here. We can enjoy life around the Philippines, life around BGC without having to be stuck to your laptop. Like
Exactly.
nomads, right?
Yeah. So the way that started for me is when I was in college, I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
And then I joined an online community from this podcast called The Tropical MBA. They have a community called The Dynamite Circle. And their whole philosophy at that time was, like the 4-hour workweek philosophy. Like, go on your laptop, write a few things, whatever, set up a business that makes you money and you get to enjoy your life. So, the idea was like lifestyle business design. So you design a business that will give you freedom and enough income that you can enjoy your life. So you're not necessarily gunning to become a billion-dollar empire or the next Elon Musk or anything. You just want to have enough money to enjoy your life, which is what I kind of took to heart, and I've been living that 4-hour work week ever since. It's like,
fantastic.
So everything I've ever done, I mean, of course, I've had the times where I've worked harder, especially when I got started, but the whole mission was, let's try to set it up so that I can enjoy my life and not forget that the purpose of the business is to support my life, not for me to just spend my time thinking about how to grow the business.
Right. So clearly you have a life of freedom. I mean, what do your day-to-day looks like here in BGC?
Well, like I like to wake up, for example, in the morning early, go for a walk. Like this morning I walked 7 kilometers around. Just, there's great sidewalks here in BGC, which is a great reason to be here. So I took advantage of that. Then I came home, had some coffee, read a little bit in my Stoic philosophy book, and came out to meet you. Which is completely like, well, we planned it a couple days in advance, but it's like, I could do kind of whatever I want with my day. So if I'm not doing something like this, then I could, read a little bit, I could think of some ideas, maybe go hang out with other people. I'm a very social person, so I do meet a lot of people all the time. So I spend a lot of time with friends, doing activities, you can go karaoke, you can go have dinner somewhere, which I'm trying to cut down on because my weight's kind of getting a little out of control, but all right, that's one thing. But yeah, pretty much just spending the days however I want to spend them. So
seems like you're just living the expat's dream. I mean, imagine the most Americans, when they see this kind of video, they're like, oh, I'm working 9 to 5, in the rat race, corporate life, working very hard every day, monotonous routines. But then Greg's out here living in the Philippines, running his business and living, I guess, having a free schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
was it always like that though?
Well, it wasn't always like it because when I first started my business, I had to work hard to get the clients and get it all set up correctly. But it kind of became that way over the last maybe 6-7 years. That I guess part of it is also because when I travel, like I'll go to a conference in Thailand, for example, and that's where I'll meet nomads who are also doing similar businesses, and then we can work out business deals together. And that's how I got my best clients, is traveling around to these digital nomad hotspots, meeting other digital nomads at social events, and then that's how I grow my business. So in a way, I guess you could say, like, when you're not really working specific hours, you're kind of always working, but it doesn't really feel like it, because you hang out with friends, and then one of your friends says, hey, you know what, I kind of need what you're selling, let's talk, and that's how I get some of my best deals. Basically. But it wasn't always like that, but I intentionally wanted it to be like that. So I moved it along the way to become that way.
So how did you integrate yourself into these social circles and find community as an expat in the Philippines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So over the last several years, I keep moving every year, which is why now I want to stay put in BGC. But kind of my standard procedure is, you go to a new city, then you go to the Facebook group. So you go to, like, let's say you're going to go to Manila. So you'd look up Manila Foreigners Club or Manila Expats Group. So you type in those kinds of keywords in Facebook, and then you join the Facebook groups for expats and all that. And then I'm a part of this Dynamite Circle, which is a private group of business owners all around the world. And they have chapters in almost every city, including BGC. So so I'll check in with the Dynamite Circle and see who's there from the group already. So it's kind of like instant friends built in. And then, of course, once you meet a few people, they introduce you to other people. Like, oh, I know this other guy you'd be cool to hang out with, or, let's go get drinks. And then they invite their other friends, and you meet some other people. And if you hit it off, you become friends. So it kind of like grows the network. So it starts with like going in cold. Start with like the Facebook groups. Join those kinds of things. Some of the YouTubers have communities you can join as well. Like when I went to Thailand, I joined a community by a guy who was running a YouTube channel there, and then met some people that way, and then they introduced me to other people. So I think that's the way to kind of get in cold, and then it kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah, there's definitely a snowball effect to it. Like once you just meet a couple of people within these Facebook groups, then your network just expands way faster.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so can you give us a ballpark estimate of how much your VA business pulls down per month?
So at the moment, I would say if I annualize because it can go up or down depending on the month and when the invoices are due for clients, but on an annual basis, I make over $100,000 a year profit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
And that's like how many hours of work? How many hours a week do you work these days?
Well, if you just count on the maintenance work where I have to check in on stuff, it's maybe a couple hours a week. Right, where I can talk to my staff and just kind of figure out like if everything's okay or not. So that's fine. But of course, to get there, you have to make the right contacts, meet the right people, set the right things up, give the right direction, because that couple hours I'll have a meeting with my manager, for example, are important because the instructions I give can decide whether or not, the next month will be good or not as well, right? So it's kind of, I think that's the weird thing for many people is that they equate the income to how many hours you're supposed to put, but it's really the value you provide. Like, it's like, what are you doing? Because you can like wipe a table for 2 hours, but that doesn't make it very valuable service. But if I tell my manager how to structure the next client's, team, and the team is successful, that can bring in a lot of money, employ a lot of people. That's a very valuable 2 hours. So, so I don't look at it, So I think that's the number one thing that employee-minded people who work for a living kind of get weirded out about. It's like, oh, well, how can you make so much money in just so little time? And it's like, it's what you do at that time.
And
right?
it doesn't
that
have to be
matters.
difficult. You just work smarter, not harder.
Right, exactly. But if you also include then the time that I'm spending networking, meeting people, going to events, then of course the amount of investment of time and all that is much greater.
That's true.
But I don't see it necessarily as work, because when I go to like even a conference and hang out with a bunch of people for a couple of weeks, it's a very busy couple of weeks, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the people, I
Yeah.
enjoy the crowds.
Exactly.
And I'll only do business with people I like,
That's great.
so
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, so you're basically shaping your lifestyle, excuse me, your business around your lifestyle.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, right. So what advice, like, there's a lot of expats watching here that want to make money online, that want to make money while living abroad and start their income streams
Yeah.
while living out in the Philippines to support their lifestyle. What advice would you give to these expats that are looking to make money in online business while living
Well,
abroad?
I would say whatever is your specialty at home. Like, let's say you work in a hospital as a nurse. Like, you cannot do nursing here because nurses in the Philippines don't get paid very much, and as a foreigner, you can't even work here without permits and certifications and all that kind of stuff, right? So a nurse might say, "Oh, well, I'm screwed. I cannot, move there. I have to just work here." But that's not really true, because as a nurse, you can get a job, for example, being a legal consultant, where law firms pay nurses to analyze medical cases for court, right? Like for example, a malpractice case, they'll ask a nurse expert witness, to analyze the case. Is there a case here? Did the other nurse in the case act appropriately or not?
Right.
And that kind of job you can actually do remotely. So you can be an expert witness. You could be a legal analyst for legal cases involving medicine. You could become a pharmaceutical researcher because you know all the medical terms in medicines, right? So there's other things. You have to think outside of your immediate job. So
Right.
even if you're doing something like construction, oh well, I'm in construction. There's nothing I can do. I can't. Builders in the Philippines don't get paid a lot if you're just putting up drywall. But you could make a course about how to do drywall and home improvement, sell the course to people, and then that could become a thing. Or you can become a consultant where companies from the US might call you and ask you what's the best way to do a certain project, and you can do that remotely because they can send you the information and you can get on the phone, give them advice and all that. So there's ways you can take your expertise and twist it into something you could do online.
Yeah.
And in almost every case, there's very rarely, but you have to be willing to try something new and out of the box.
Right, right. So it seems like for you, it was always just within the field of assistance, right, and hiring VAs?
Well, like I went to school for business, so I have my
Okay.
bachelor's degree in management and my master's in
Right.
marketing. So I always knew from the beginning I wanted to run a business. That's like
Okay.
number one. Like I knew that since I was very young, So I pursued that, and I knew that as I was learning about business, that would give me the freedom I wanted. So when I was like about 18 years old, I had two paths. There was the computer science path, because I was really into computer stuff. Like I was programming in Visual Basic, C++. I was like going on the developer path, but then I also had my business kind of like instinct. And I decided I will go major in business instead of computers because I want to be able to design my life and control my life.
Right.
So I made that decision young and kind of stuck with that path. So that was very intentional. But for people who kind of took the other path, it's not too late to kind of learn a little bit of this business skill and, change course. Or even if you want to stick as being an employee, find a way to do something in your expertise that's remote.
And now, kind of shifting gears here, how much would you say you spend per month living in BGC?
I would say with my mandatory expenses here, maybe $2,000 a month would be enough.
Nice.
I do spend a little bit more than that because I like to go out places or buy some nice things once in a while, but those are like optional spending. But I would say for $2,000 a month would cover me, my living expenses, along with my girlfriend because she stays with me. So the food for the two of us, the rent, the utilities, going out to eat with friends a few times a week, quite often actually, I would even say. So I would say that probably fits about $2,000 a month. Then if you add like trips out of town, which we've done quite a bit of, that'll add another maybe $1,000, $1,500 a month for trips if you want to travel in style. I mean, I know that there are some vloggers out there who advocate that, oh, you can move to the Philippines for $800 a month or whatever. It's like, yes, but actually no, right? It's like
Yeah,
in theory,
no.
sure, if you want to eat just one boiled egg and some rice for breakfast every morning,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with it, it's probably healthy, but probably for most foreigners who are used to a different standard of living, they're not going to be happy with that.
Right.
You know,
yeah, you don't want to live here pinching your pennies.
No, exactly. You don't want to do that. So I think, and same thing with trips. You can say, well, you can go take a bus, stay in a hostel with 12 people, you know, split a room, whatever. But then, you know, when you're already in your 30s, 40s, 50s, like maybe you don't want to stay in a hostel where people party all night. Maybe you want to have your own room and, you know, hot water in the shower and all that kind of stuff. So now all of a sudden that same trip costs you 4 times more money. That's why when I budget my trips, I'd say $1,000 for a week trip is probably a minimum reasonable budget for accommodation, transportation, and enjoying the place you go to.
But as far as living in BGC, $2,000 is enough.
$2,000 is enough, definitely. Yeah.
And
definitely.
Diving like into what those expenses consist of, how much is your rent?
So I'm paying about $580 a month for rent.
$580.
It's about 32,000 pesos.
Amazing. And how many bedrooms?
It's a one-bedroom place, and it has a little maid's room, which is like I put like my computer stuff there, so it's kind of giving me a separation. But I actually have seen places for less in BGC. Like there was a studio at Verve Tower, 40-something square meters, that was 25,000 pesos, for example. So you can actually find some pretty good deals. I did have to furnish my own place. I will add that.
Okay, so that's
probably why it's cheaper than the market rate would indicate. Because outside of the major appliances like the fridge, you know, washing machine or whatever, I bought my own table, bed, mattress, everything is that I bought. You know, I bought that myself.
I see. And as far as like your entertainment costs, how much would that roughly be per month?
It's hard to equate that. Like if I'm busy with some stuff or just kind of like really busy with meeting people, it's not that much. But I would say every time I go out with friends to like a bar, restaurant, you get something to eat, something to drink, I would say 2,000-3,000 pesos a night for an outing is reasonable budget.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I know you can like go and just get like, you know, 1 Coke Zero at a bar and stay there all night. And sometimes I do that too if I'm not feeling like drinking anything else or doing anything else. But realistically, if you go to a restaurant, you're going to end up ordering some food and all that. And, you know, so it'll add up.
And I'm also curious, like, is your utilities high at all?
I think my electric bill is about 7,500 pesos a month on average, which is about $150.
Okay.
Because I do run the aircon quite a bit. Internet's about 2,000 pesos for 400 Mbps connection.
400 MB. Okay, that's really good. Like $40 a month.
Yeah, so that's like about $40 a month. Water's maybe $10 a month, something like that.
Nice. So your utilities are not really that high.
They're not very high,
It doesn't
no.
really surpass $200 a month.
Exactly.